December 7, 1944, 5:30 a.m. over the Philippine Sea. Darkness clung to the flight deck of USS Essex like wet canvas. The sea heaved beneath the task force. Black water under a grey dawn, as radar operators in the Combat Information Center, SEIC, blinked at the glow of green cathode screens. Static, then dots. Hundreds of them, merging into crimson clusters on the scope, speed 220 knots, altitude 500 feet, closing fast. A voice cracked through the intercom. Bajeez inbound. Estimate 60 clicks bearing 042. And in that instant, time dilated. Men scrambled to battle stations. Steam hissed from catapults. The metallic tang of adrenaline mixed with salt air and cordite residue from yesterday's drills. On the bridge, binoculars snapped up. The horizon was empty. But the radar's cold eye saw what the sky did not yet betray, death coming in waves. 250 miles west, over Leyte, Japanese air groups formed with religious precision. Pilots kissed family photos, recited loyalty pledges, tightened their white headbands embroidered with the Hinamaru. These weren't just planes. They were Feng Shui, the divine wind reborn. Tenahika Banzai echoed across runways. Engines screamed to life, Nakajima Sake and Mitsubishi Kinsai roaring like possessed spirits. Zeros, Vals, Judys, rammed into fuselages 550-pound bombs. Each aircraft a human missile, each pilot a martyr. They believed the myth no fleet can stop a god. At 05:58, the first kamikaze broke cloud cover. Just a speck. Then 10, then 50. Radar blipped again. Hostiles now, 15 clicks! Descending. And suddenly, the impossible was seen. A destroyer off the port bow, USS Cassin Young, lit up the dawn. 5-inch turrets turned like living things. Anti-aircraft crews wore asbestos gloves, teeth clenched, goggles fogging. The guns barked first, deep, rhythmic thumps that shook the steel decks. Then the sky erupted. Flak bursts painted concentric rings of fire and smoke. Parabolas of red tracers reached upward like fingers from hell. 10 twisted, trailing black, exploded at 200 feet. Shrapnel rained on the water. Another dove, straight at the carrier's island. A twin 40mm Bofors team tracked it. Lead cooker squeezing triggers. Crack, crack, crack. Shells tore through the cockpit. The plane veered, screaming past the bridge, and slammed into the sea 50 yards away. A geyser of steam and oil and silence followed. The first wave cost the Allies 6 damaged ships, 2 sunk. But the deadliest weapon hadn't fired a shot. It had warned them. That night, in his diary, a radar operator wrote, "Where see them now, before they even leave their bases. They're fast, devoted, but not invisible, not anymore." And in Tokyo, deep in the war room, a staff officer stared at a map streaked with red arrows, arrows that now veered into oblivion, and muttered the truth they refused to speak. The sky is no longer ours. The Pacific, 1941-1944. The tide had turned, but not the mindset. Japan, born of Bushido, bred a warrior caste that worshipped the sword, and its modern echo, the human blade. By late 1943, the Imperial Navy was bleeding. Guadalcanal lost. Rabaul under siege. The B-29s coming. Tactically, they knew attrition was suicide. Strategically, they clung to myth. On October 15, 1944, Vice Admiral Takijirti Nishi stood on the runway at Mabalacat, Philippines. His face was stone. His voice low and charged. "All our fleets are at the bottom of the sea. Our planes are shot down by enemy fighters. Our pilots are young and not well trained. How can we reverse this?" The answer, Shinpu Tokubetsuke Geikitai, Divine Wind Special Attack Units. The name alone invoked the 13th century typhoon that shattered Kublai Khan's armada. Now they would summon another 2,000 suicide pilots, hand-picked, vetted, polished like jewels. "If a single plane gets through," T. Nishi said, "it can sink a carrier. If 10 get through, the fleet breaks. If 100, the enemy will fear the sun." They believed in invincibility, in purity, in the superiority of will over machine. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles east, on the deck of USS Enterprise, a new doctrine was unfolding. One built on data, not doctrine. The Allies had spent 2 years learning how to see. Radar was not a single tool. It was an ecosystem. From Hawaii to Guadalcanal, a silent web now stretched across the Pacific. Siine Pass Radar Watch in Oahu, tracking every training sortie from occupied Guam. VPBY Catalina flying boats patrolling 800-mile arcs, dropping sonobuoys, scanning with microwave radar. Surface task groups deploying combat information centers, CICs. Nerve hubs where mechanical vision met human decision. At night, after kamikaze attacks on Tassafaronga, the U.S. Navy commissioned the Air Combat Intelligence Program, one of the first real-time electronic warfare systems. Every strike aircraft carried SCR-720 interception radar. Carriers boasted SG surface search radar, 10 cm wavelength, range 30 miles. Escort destroyers used SC air search, a long-range, low-resolution. Cruisers upgraded to Mk-37 fire control systems, capable of locking onto a 300-knot target at 15 miles. The Americans didn't worship the pilot. They mapped the sky. And the Japanese. They still thought radar was a tool, not a weapon. Tokyo's war correspondents spun lies. Enemy devices are unreliable in tropics. Or low-level approach evades their sights. In Kokoku, a November 1944 broadcast declared, "The Americans cannot resist spiritual power. Our planes dive with the wind of the gods. They scatter like paper." They hadn't yet met the codebreakers of Station HYPO, or the IBM tabulators that sorted sighting reports into combat-ready patterns, or the SCR-584 microwave radar that could lead a B-25 to within 10 feet of a kamikaze's flight path. One captured Japanese flyer, interrogated after surviving a failed attack on Okinawa, confessed, "Wit trained in silence. We believe surprise was ours. But your ships, they moved like ghosts. They were ready. Always ready. As if they knew we were coming before we knew ourselves." The setup was complete. One side believed in the unseen force of death. The other had built a machine to destroy the unseen. And in the unforgiving sky, the truth would not care which myth was purer, only which one was prepared to be seen. This was not war of muscles. It was a war of waves, radio pulses, time delays, azimuth calculations. The SG surface search radar, mounted on the mast of USS Essex, was a marvel of 10-centimeter microwave tech. Unlike earlier VHF sets, it painted a clear image of low-flying aircraft slicing through rain and smoke like a scalpel. Peak power 35 kW, pulse repetition, 800 per second. It could detect a zero at 30 nautical miles, a Valdive bomber at 25, and when tied into the Mk-37 director, it transformed radar into a killing vector. But the true genius lay in the Combat Information Center, the CIC. Below decks, behind armored bulkheads, sailors in headphones manned plotting tables, tracked radar echoes in real time, fed data to fire control computers. When a kamikaze approached, the process unfolded in seconds: detection, SG or SC radar, 2 classification, speed, altitude, bearing, 3 assignment, targeting to ship with clearest line, A4 engagement via Mk-37's analog computer, which calculated lead ballistics, wind drift. The Mk-37, with its 2 dual 5-inch 38-gun mounts, didn't aim at the plane. It aimed at where the plane would be, a point in space defined by velocity, time, and the laws of physics. As one gunner on USS San Jacinto recalled, "You didn't watch the sky. You watched the radar. The pointer would sweep around the scope, and when it hit green, you pulled the trigger." The shell flew before the enemy was even in sight. Meanwhile, Japan's Type 22 Ku radar, their main fire control system, was a generation behind. Built with 50 cm wavelength, it suffered from coarse resolution, couldn't track targets below 10 Zalosen feet effectively, and required operators to manually tune tubes. Worse, doctrine demanded pilots maintain radio silence during approach, meaning no mid-course corrections. Once the dive began, it was a one-way ticket. Their ships, like Yamato, boasted Type 11 air search radar, but it maxed out at 35 miles, could only track large formations, and was easily jammed by American ECM's electronic countermeasures, sets like the APT-2 Carousel, a beam-riding transmitter that screamed static directly into Japanese frequencies. The kamikaze aircraft themselves were engineering contrasts in extremis. The ASIC M50, elegant and agile, but slow 320 mph, fragile and unarmored. Its AK-21 engine sputtered above 20,000 feet, useless for high-altitude attacks. The D-3A2 Val, a rugged dive bomber, could deliver a 250 kg bomb, but had no range and was easy prey for flak. The Judy D-4Y Suizi, a refined design with inverted gull wings and a 308p engine, capable of 380 MIOF and 30,000-foot service ceiling, yet overloaded with fuel tanks for suicide rolls, making it a tinderbox. No kamikaze plane carried radar. No escort. No evasive capability. They were not designed to survive. They were designed to arrive. But the Allies had built a machine to make arrival obsolete. On January 12, 1945, during the Lingayen Gulf operation, the system was tested to its core. A flight of 30 Val dive bombers descended in a fan-shaped pattern, intent on sinking USS St. Lo. What they encountered was not chaos, but orchestrated terror. Sea ice aboard St. Lo lit up. SG radar picked them at 28 miles. SC radar on USS Reno confirmed the formation. At 22 miles, the Mk-37 Director took control. At 18 miles, the first salvo went downrange. 5-inch shells with VT proximity fuses, engineered to detonate within 70 feet of an aircraft, even without a direct hit. At 10 miles, the sky filled with bursts. At 5 miles, the valves began to break. One came straight down. The Director's gyro spun, calculated a 20 degrees lead angle, triggered a 40 mm battery. The shell exploded just beneath the cockpit. The plane flipped, cartwheeled, and slammed into the water, missed the ship by 40 yards. Gun camera film later showed the moment a green dot drifting left on the scope. A sudden ping. Then the dot vanished, like squashing a fly. A CIC watchstander noted in his log, "You didn't even see it die." The Japanese called it the invisible net. They were wrong. It wasn't a net, it was a lens, and it could focus fire across an ocean. April 6, 1945, 8:15 a.m. off Kikaijima, Okinawa. The USS Laffey DD-724 was on picket duty. Station 13, the most dangerous post in the Pacific. Noon on a clear day, sky crystalline blue, sea flat as glass, ideal for suicide. At 80:17, the SG radar blipped, Bajis bearing 030, range 28 miles, altitude funds 200 feet, speed 190 knots. The CIC Captain Lieutenant Commander Frederick B. Lucas didn't hesitate. Condition 1. All batteries, starboard side, engage at 10 miles. Scatter patterns, section by section. The crew moved like clockwork. The 5-inch 38s heated. The 40 Mummy Bofors wound tight. The 20 Nemen Oerlikons clicked to rapid fire. On the bridge, the skipper, Frederick J. Beckton, muttered to his XO, "They think they can sneak in low. Today, we'll teach them what low looks like from under." At 80:22, the first kamikaze Zero broke 5 miles, then dropped to 200 feet, skimming the wave tops to avoid radar. But the SG's C clutter suppression had just been upgraded. It saw him. Firing solution locked. The Mk-37 announced, through a mechanical voice of dials and hydraulics. At 3.5 miles, the 5-inch guns roared. VT fuses detonated in tight clusters. Puffs of white smoke with black cores. Around the Zero's flight path. The Japanese pilot, identified later as 20-year-old Kiyomi Tsunoda, tried to evade, banking hard right. One shell exploded beneath his starboard wing. The 550-pound bomb wobbled, then jettisoned, plunged harmlessly into the sea. Tsunoda, disoriented, climbed into the teeth of the 40 Namium barrage. A direct hit blew the cockpit apart. The Zero spiraled, trailing fire, and hit the water 100 yards off the bow. One down, the CIC muttered. Then, a storm erupted. From the northeast 6 more, from the south 3 more. From above 2 Judy dive bombers peeling out of the sun. At 8:33, the second 0, carrying a 250 kg bomb, dove at 300 MF. The ship heeled hard starboard. The 49 guns tracked, shot, missed. Too fast. Too close. The plane struck the forward stack. A glancing blow that showered the deck in molten aluminum. The bomb ricocheted off the armoured deck, went off 20 feet behind the stern, sending a column of water higher than the mast. Fires erupted, wounded screamed, but the radar kept tracking. At 8:37, a D4Y Judy, low on fuel, doomed, bore straight for the bridge. The pilot, later confirmed as LT, Hideo Hagashi, had sent his last radio message. I see the enemy bridge. I am a spear. Banzai, the Mk-37 had other plans. At 1,500 yards, the 5-inch battery predicted his apex, fired a 15-second burst with fused shells. One burst enveloped the plane at 800 yards. The bomb detonated before impact. The fuselage torn in half, one wing spinning upward like a leaf, the cockpit spiraling down into the sea. But then, the unimaginable. At 80:42, a 0, so damaged its canopy was gone. Half the tail missing. Flew through the flak, through the spray, through the funnel fire, and slammed into the base of the forward 5-inch director. Impact. 35 feet from the CIC. Explosion, a fireball of fuel and shell fragments. Casualties 32 dead, 71 wounded. The director destroyed. Yet, the ship did not sink. For 12 minutes, amid smoke and flame, sailors manually directed fire with binoculars and hand signals. The 40 mm crews kept firing. The radar miraculously still swept. At 900, the final kamikaze Aval approached from the blind port quarter. The CIC, working from backup scopes below decks, called the shot. A lone 14 mm gun, manned by 2 burned but standing gunners, opened fire. 3 rounds. The Val split in half. The bomb tumbled. The pieces scattered across the horizon. When the smoke cleared, Laffey had taken 6 direct hits, lost over half her 5-inch battery, and had a hole the size of a car in her stack. But she stayed afloat, and the sky, for the first time, was clear. In the shattered CIC, a radioman handed a message to Commander Beckton. It was from Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz, sent during the attack. Hold the station. We know you're holding it. Beckton whispered to his crew. They laughed at us for building machines, for trusting numbers. But today, we didn't fight with honor. We fought with sight. A surviving Zero pilot, captured after a water landing, was later debriefed. His words, scribbled in a 1945 interrogation report. I dove with certainty. I thought the Americans would panic. But they expected me. Their fire came from nowhere. Like the air itself was angry. I was no longer invisible. I was seen. The Laffey's battle lasted 42 minutes. In that time, 22 kamikaze planes attacked. 14 were destroyed. 8 hit the ship. None sank her. And the myth, shattered on the screen of a radar scope,